The night was heavy with rain, the kind that blurs headlights and drowns out screams. Under the flickering streetlight, 3 bikers circled a lone girl standing on the roadside, her torn umbrella trembling in her hands. Her clothes were soaked, her eyes hollow, and her lips quivered as thunder rolled above. When one of the bikers dismounted and reached for her, she didn't flinch. She just whispered, with a strange calmness, "End it fast." That single sentence sliced through the storm like lightning, and for a moment, even the rain seemed to pause. Before we dive deeper into this heart-wrenching story of pain, courage, and redemption, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humanity, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to KindHeartsHub because stories like this remind us that compassion can change everything. The bikers weren't the type you'd want to cross. Leather jackets, tattoos that told stories of anger, and eyes that had seen too much darkness. They had been riding through the outskirts, reckless and loud, seeking trouble to numb the silence of their own broken lives. But when they stopped that night, it wasn't because of her. It was because one of them thought she looked like someone they once knew someone lost. The girl stood by the edge of the road, drenched, her shoulders sagging like she carried the weight of a lifetime. Her hair clung to her face, and her fingers trembled as she tried to keep the umbrella from turning inside out. There was no fear in her eyes, only emptiness, the kind that comes after you've run out of tears. As the biggest biker stepped closer, the thunder rumbled again. He smirked and reached out to grab her shoulder, teasing her, trying to provoke a reaction. But when his hand brushed against her soaked shirt and she whispered, "End it fast," something shattered inside him. He froze, his grip loosening. The others looked confused until she lifted her head, and the streetlight revealed her bruised face, swollen lip, a purple mark across her cheek, and eyes that had seen hell. The rain washed the blood from her chin, and for the first time the bikers saw not a victim, but a reflection of pain they each carried in silence. Her name was Alina, just 22. She had left home 3 weeks ago, hoping to escape the nightmare she called love. The man she trusted, the one who promised forever, had turned her world into a cage of bruises, broken promises, and whispers of worthlessness. Every day she prayed for courage not to live, but to finally end the suffering. That night, after the final fight, she had run out of tears. She walked through the storm barefoot, clutching a photograph of her mother who had passed away years before. She wanted to reach the bridge, not to cross it, but to jump. And when she saw the bikers, she thought fate had decided to finish what pain had started. But fate had other plans. The man who grabbed her, his name was Rafik, had his own story. 5 years ago, he had lost his little sister in a hit and run. She had been only 16, standing by the roadside, crying for help when no one stopped. Rafik had been a different man back then, hopeful, ambitious, working as a mechanic. But that night destroyed him. He fell into rage, alcohol, and bad company, riding through life with no destination. But when Alina whispered those words, "End it fast," it was like hearing his sister's voice echo from the grave. The same tone of surrender. The same quiet plea. He stepped back, stunned. The others stopped laughing. For the first time in years, silence surrounded them, not the empty kind, but the heavy kind that carries meaning. Rafik took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She flinched, expecting violence, but his hands were gentle. "You're freezing," he muttered under his breath. She looked at him, confused, almost afraid to believe there was softness left in this world. They took her to a small roadside tea stall that was still open, its dim light flickering like a dying candle. The owner, an old man with a kind face, gave her a cup of hot tea. Her hands shook so hard she could barely hold it. Rafik sat across from her, trying to find the right words. The rain had stopped, but inside that small shelter, it felt like a storm of emotions was just beginning. Alina didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was low and tired. She told them everything: the abuse, the loneliness, the way she had become invisible in her own life. She told them she no longer believed in kindness or good men. And as her words filled the silence, the bikers, these men who had been labeled troublemakers, sat still, listening, some with eyes glistening, others clenching their fists in quiet anger at the world. Rafik realized how wrong he had been all his life, searching for revenge, hiding behind toughness, while people like Alina were out there, silently begging for someone to just see them, to care. By morning, the storm had cleared. Elena sat outside the stall, watching the sunrise, her heart still heavy but slightly warmer. Rafik came and sat beside her. "You have two choices," he said softly. "Go back to the darkness that broke you, or ride with us not to escape, but to start over." She turned to him, unsure. "I don't even know how to live anymore," she whispered. "Then let's learn together," he replied, and so she did. Over the next few weeks, the bikers who once rode to forget began to ride to heal. They took her in like a sister, teaching her how to ride, how to stand tall again, how to scream into the wind and let go of the pain. She started to smile again, small, hesitant smiles at first, then brighter ones that reminded them of sunrise. Rafik noticed how her laughter slowly filled the spaces his guilt once lived in. The gang started doing something new, stopping at orphanages, old age homes, and roadside shelters to donate food and blankets. They became known as the Kind Riders, the same men once feared, now spreading kindness wherever their wheels took them. But life wasn't done testing them. One evening, as Alina was helping at a shelter, her past found her again. Her abuser showed up drunk, furious, demanding she return home. His voice sent chills down her spine, but this time she wasn't alone. Rafik stood between them, his eyes cold but controlled. "She's not yours anymore," he said. The man sneered, raising his hand, but Alina stepped forward before Rafik could react. Her voice didn't tremble. "You already ended me once," she said. "This time I'm living for myself." It was the first time she stood up without fear. The man left that night, defeated not by fists, but by the power of a woman who finally found her strength. Months later, Elena started a small foundation with Rafik's help, a safe space for women who had nowhere else to go. They called it Kind Hearts Haven. It became a home for the broken, the lost, and the forgotten. Every wall was painted with messages of hope. Every story inside carried the same heartbeat, that kindness can be the light that saves someone from the edge. And every time a new girl walked in, scared and trembling, Alina would remember that night, the rain, the headlights, the whisper, and she'd smile through tears, whispering back, "Not today. Today we begin again." If this story touched your heart, if you believe that kindness and compassion can turn pain into purpose, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to KindHeartsHub. Your one click might reach someone standing at the edge, waiting for a sign to hold on. And before this story ends, we have one special request. Comment below. Kindness saves lives. To remind the world that empathy is the strongest weapon against darkness. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can stop a storm and help someone whisper, "I want to live again."